My brother spent my $25,000 on risky games of chance and my parents defended him, so I orchestrated a quiet countermove and leaving him living in fear. I, 28 female, have a younger brother, 24 male, and I let him move in with me a couple of months back. He used to be a party animal back in high school and through college and wasted all his years there. Naturally, his grades were bad, and he didn't have any work experience either, so he couldn't land a decent job. He refuses to take up low-paying jobs because he feels that he is destined for bigger things. Those are his words, not mine. My parents requested I let him move in with me for a while so that he could watch me and learn to be independent, because while he was living with my parents, all he would do was play video games in his room. If my parents brought up the job situation with him, he'd get mad and rant about how everyone was constantly pressuring him. I loved my brother and used to dote on him even up until a few weeks back, so I agreed to let him move in with me, and he was happy to do so. When he moved in with me, for the first couple of weeks, he did the same thing that he used to do at our parents' house. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands to nudge him in the right direction and sat him down to explain the importance of working from an early age. I'd been working since my days in college, and by the time I graduated, I had enough experience to get hired and make a decent income. He'd obviously passed that point of time long ago, but he could still turn things around for himself, and he had too, since our parents wouldn't be around forever. As for me, I'd have a family of my own someday and couldn't support him throughout his life. After that lecture, he started to take things a little more seriously and told me that he'd start looking for jobs online and try to make himself better. I don't know if he actually did start searching for jobs, but every time I'd enter his room to check up on him, he seemed busy. Then, a few months back, he approached me and asked me to lend him access to my savings account because he and a couple of his friends were planning to start a business of their own, and he needed money to invest in it. They were planning to start a gaming and electronics store, and for that, he needed a lot of money to make his contribution toward it. He didn't want to bother our parents by asking them, so he'd come to me instead. He promised me that once they started making profits, he'd return the money to me or even better, make me a partner in their business. The idea seemed good on paper, and he and his friends seemed to have proper plans for this too. I consulted with my parents, and even they agreed that this was a great idea and pushed me to go along with it. One of my close friends, who happened to be a lawyer, had the good sense to suggest that I get him to sign a legal document to seal the deal that he'd return all the money or make me a partner in his business at some point. She believed that even if it was family, I shouldn't leave things up to chance, so I did exactly that. I should have realized there was something off when my brother hesitated to sign that legal document, saying that because we were family, he shouldn't have to worry about stuff like this. But I somehow managed to convince him and told him that it was just a formality, neither of us should worry about it much. So, he did, but only after I promised him that it was just a formality and nothing else. I then added him to my card that was linked to my savings account and told him that he was allowed to spend half of it but not more, not without my consent. He agreed to that. I'd saved around $25,000 over the past 8 years so that I could buy my own house in the suburbs soon enough and move out of my rented apartment. It was my hard-earned money, and I'd had to make a lot of sacrifices to save that amount, so it meant a lot to me. I expected my brother to respect that as well and stick to the rules that I'd set for him. He could ask me if he needed more money, and I would arrange for it, but he couldn't use up more than $12,000 out of my savings without asking me first. That was a couple of months ago. After I added him to my card, I started monitoring his expenses and was kind of surprised to notice that he hadn't spent a single dollar out of it. He then left to live with his friends for a few weeks since they needed to start working on their business, and I planned to continue monitoring the situation. But afterward, I took on a new project, and it slipped my mind altogether. Finally, when I did check a few weeks later, the bank account had been absolutely emptied, save for a few hundred. I was in shock when I realized that all the money I saved had been spent, and there was still no word from my brother about it. We'd been in touch after he left, but we only discussed how his store was coming along, and he only had good news to share. He didn't tell me anything about the expenses, and I was really busy, so I didn't ask him either. I trusted him, so I didn't think that there was any risk here, but he proved me wrong. When I finally realized that he'd spent all my savings, I decided to call him up and confront him. He told me that there must have been some mistake, but even his lies didn't sound convincing. I kept pushing him to tell me the truth, which is when he finally admitted that he gambled it all away with his friends and lost it. He told me that he was sorry and that he tried to get it all back, but he needed some time. I lost it at that point and was so disheartened that I didn't even argue with him or yell at him. I just hung up and cried for about an hour or so. I was so upset that he not only wasted my money but also spent it all on something like gambling just for fun, knowing that this was money that I'd been putting aside for my future and that I'd worked very hard for. I had to make a lot of sacrifices along the way. It sucked that I trusted my brother, and he hadn't even thought twice before betraying me like this. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that it was all just gone, and it was unlikely that my brother himself would be able to get it all back. Thankfully, those were just my savings, and I still did have money for my day-to-day activities and to pay my bills, but that was not enough for me. I was furious and hurt that my brother had done this. After I was done crying, I called my parents up to let them know what had happened. They were shocked but told me to have faith in my brother and give him another chance to fix this, which was crazy because what he'd done had just screwed any trust or faith I'd ever had in him. That my parents still tried to defend my brother was just so insensitive and cruel. I told them that they had to make him get a job so he could start paying me back, or they could give me the money themselves, but either by hook or by crook, I wanted my money back. Or else, I'd be taking him to court. He did sign a document promising he'd return the loan or make me a partner, and since there was no business at all, he obviously had to return the money. If he didn't, then I'd be left with no other option but to file a lawsuit against him and take things up legally. I didn't want to go that way since it would be a lot of drama for all of us involved, so they'd be better off just giving me the money themselves. I gave them an out, but instead of taking that, they instead began to guilt trip me, saying that this was my brother we were talking about here, and for me to even think about taking him to court was a sin because he was my brother and we were related by blood. They wanted me to forgive him for everything and have a fresh start. They were neither willing to pay me back nor willing to punish my brother, and it just made me realize exactly how selfish and unfair the rest of my family was. So, I told my parents I didn't care about family, all I wanted was my money back, and I'd go to court if that's what was needed here. My parents still stuck by what they'd said and even threatened to cut ties with me if I took him to court. They were convinced that I was the bad guy here for some reason and kept defending him because apparently he was just a young guy, and this is the age where people make mistakes and learn from them. Like, he's not even that young, he's almost 24, and at this age, I was already working and paying my bills myself. He's also allowed to make mistakes, but gambling away all my savings isn't a mistake, it's a choice that he made on purpose and then tried to lie about just to cover it up. I don't even think there was a business idea in the first place, and even if there was, that was all talk. They never intended on creating something at all, but that was not my concern at all. All I wanted was my money back at any cost whatsoever, and if I had to go against my family for it, then I'd gladly do so. So, a few weeks back, I filed a lawsuit against my brother, demanding that he pay me back for the money that he'd spent. Like I'd already known, my parents completely lost it when my brother was served. He was still living with his friends and was very freaked out when he learned what I was doing, but no matter what they said, I wasn't going to back down. They tried a lot of ways to get me to stop the legal proceedings, like apologizing, pleading, and even emotional manipulation, but none of it worked. I had to steel myself for it because my family had always been my soft spot, but I couldn't let them get away with this. My hard work and my money meant more to me than these people, since they clearly cared about nothing but themselves. So, I had to be just as selfish as them if I wanted to secure my future and get my money back. My brother especially tried every way in his book to appease me and even promised me that he'd return the money to me as soon as he was able to, but I didn't care anymore. He'd wasted away enough of his life and our parents' money, but he wasn't about to treat me like that as well. He'd grown up to be a terribly ungrateful piece of shit, all thanks to our parents and their complete lack of rules or any discipline when it came to my brother, but that was their problem entirely. Now, we've already been to a couple of mediation procedures with our lawyers to resolve the dispute here, and tensions have been running high, mostly on my part, but I can't help it because they're being infuriatingly defensive instead of just admitting that they messed up and are acting like they're the victims here. In addition to that, I also found out something about my brother a few days back from my uncle that has completely changed the way I look at my parents and brother. I was already not on good terms with them, but recently, my uncle reached out to me to tell me that he'd spoken to my mother, his sister, and had heard about the ongoing tiff between us. He decided to come clean about something regarding my college tuition. Apparently, back when I started college, my parents had made a big deal about paying for it all and told me that I needed to study hard and make sure that whatever they were paying was worth it so I could repay them eventually, which I have been doing. But they weren't the ones paying for my tuition at all, it was actually my uncle. They'd taken a loan from him to pay for me to attend a mediocre college so that they could send my brother to private school without me knowing. They'd actually forced me to attend my safety school even though I'd gotten into my first choice simply because my first choice was not in their budget, but it was. They just cared more about my brother attending the school of his choice to be with his friends, so they had to force me to pick a different college. It was my brother's idea for our parents to manipulate me into going to a different college just so he could attend private school. I didn't even know he didn't go to public school like I used to up until recently. It blew my mind that my parents were willing to go to such insane lengths just for my brother's happiness. I'd only come back home for the holidays, so it was relatively easy for them to lie about where my brother went to school. Once I graduated college, he graduated as well, since I had a 4-year degree, and so I just never ever found out. They were willing to sacrifice anything, even my future, and it was beyond disturbing. So, even at the young age of 14, he was just as sly and cunning as he is now, and nobody thought to tell me this because my uncle believed that this was none of his business, and of course, my parents didn't think that I deserved to know so they could continue fooling me for years to come. I was shocked and couldn't believe what I was being told, but it was all true. My uncle even sent me proof of his transfers to my mother through my years at college. So, I'd essentially been paying my uncle back, not my parents, and that's what made their manipulation all the more unforgivable because they had absolutely no contribution to my education, yet they brought it up every chance they got and told me that if I was going to go against them, then I had to pay everything back to them at once, which obviously wasn't possible for me. They'd remind me of what I owe them at every small disagreement, and as it turns out, I didn't even owe them anything. It's crazy that one's own parents and brother can even be capable of such cruelty, but that's just how my family is, I guess. There were still a couple of days to go before the next meeting when I found out, but I couldn't wait till the next meeting to do something about this. I just felt betrayed and hurt all at once, so I decided to call my brother up and give him a piece of my mind. I hadn't blocked any of them yet because I hadn't had the heart to, but they'd blocked me, so I couldn't get through to him at first. I was fueled with rage at the time, and when I realized that he'd blocked me, I was even more incensed and decided to do something that I knew for sure was going to hurt his ego. I decided to tell his friends about what was going on because I was 110% sure that he must not have told any of them, since they were all from wealthy families, and this was one of his sore spots. He was always trying to impress them and fit in with them even at the age of 24. I hadn't said anything about this to his friends earlier because it felt petty and childish, but now that I knew what I knew, I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. A long time had passed since then, but the fact that he screwed me over just for his own sake was just something that I couldn't tolerate, not just once but so many damn times that I'd lost count now. But I did manage to find a few of his close friends after a lot of stalking. Once I did, I sent out a mass text telling them all about what kind of trouble my brother was in, and I didn't spare any details because as far as I was concerned, the more personal the message was, the better I was going to feel about it. After I sent it, I felt loads better, like I thought I would, but the very next day, my mother started texting me frantically, demanding that I apologize to my brother's friends and take back what I said because apparently they kicked him out of the house they were all living in once they found out that he was caught up in a legal dispute regarding money and that he never was as financially well off as he pretended to be. So, his friends were just as shallow and pathetic as he was, and I believe that it served him right, but my mother thinks that I went too far. Apparently, I'm already ruining their lives by dragging them into a legal battle, and now, as if that wasn't bad enough, I got his friends involved and had him kicked out of his house as well as his friend circle. I tried to confront her regarding what I'd learned from my uncle, but she was so hysterical that I could barely get a word in. I'd never heard my mother scream at anyone this loudly, so this was definitely a change, and I almost thought she'd been possessed. Things with my dad and brother weren't that great either because I could hear them in the background really faintly. I'm guessing that my brother was having a violent temper tantrum and smashing things while my dad was trying to control him. I feel like I triggered a very nasty breakdown in my family, which really doesn't feel as good as I thought it would. Am I the asshole for telling my brother's friends that he'd scammed me and I was now suing him so they'd kick him out? Apparently, they'd asked him to leave because he'd been lying about a lot of things to them. It wasn't the fact that he wasn't as well off as them that got him kicked out, but the pretense and lies that he'd put up for years that forced them to cut him out of their lives. Apparently, he'd go out of his way to spend money and show off his wealth, which meant that he often ended up spending way more than any of them. His friends had come over to our house a few times and had been surprised by how modestly we lived despite our wealth. My brother had told them that it was because his parents didn't want to come off as snobby, and my parents had played along with the whole rich family act. It was insane, and I still don't know if I should be laughing at their foolishness and desperate need for validation or if I should be embarrassed by how they've been trying so damn hard. It's actually so pathetic, but his friends did thank me for telling them the truth because they couldn't just continue to be friends with someone like my brother who would scam his own family just to brag about how rich he was. If he could do that to his sister, then there was nothing stopping him from turning on his friends one day and pulling the same kind of crap to impress someone else, and that's really concerning. So, I suppose I did end up doing something good for someone at the very least. It's been about 2 days since my mother's breakdown, and she hasn't texted me since then, but we're supposed to meet in 4 days for a mediation session. If we're not able to wrap things up and come to a conclusion by the next meeting, then things might have to go to trial. That'll mean my brother will be totally screwed. I'm not going to lie, the idea of that is appealing, but it also means that I myself will have to keep paying for my lawyer services. She's my friend, so she's charging me less than she would others, but it's still pretty expensive for me. I don't know if this going to trial is in my own best interest, but I don't think they're going to back down that easily after I exposed my brother, so I pretty much have no idea what to expect from any of them right now. I'm back again right now because my family just showed up at my house a couple of hours back. No lawyers and no documents, just them looking like a mob minus the pitchforks. I didn't let them in and decided to keep them in the hallway while speaking to them because I didn't trust any of them one bit, especially my brother, because the last time I'd heard from him, he'd been smashing things and throwing a temper tantrum as if he wasn't a 24-year-old man but a child who'd been denied candy or something. So, I didn't trust him not to do the same thing in my house if I let him in, or maybe even worse. They tried to convince me to let them in, but I didn't. Instead, I turned on the sound recorder on my phone and recorded whatever they were saying to me. My parents tried to emotionally blackmail me into settling for an amount way less than what had been taken from me for now because we were family and this dispute was taking a toll on my poor little brother's mental health and making him act out. My brother then tried to convince me that he was really trying to clean up his act and needed my help to do so, and he would consider it a blessing if I settled for about $5,000, which doesn't even cut it. They kept saying they'd repay me eventually, but I didn't care about that. I knew that they could afford to pay me back but didn't want to because they were greedy and selfish. So, I told them that I wasn't settling for anything at all and that if they tried to come back here again or tried to speak to me without my lawyer present, then I'd call the police. Of course, my brother lost his temper and then kicked my door with such force that when I checked it out after they'd left, I noticed that the spot where he kicked had splintered. It had still held up after the hit, but it had been damaged, so I recorded that as well, and I would have called the cops then, but it was late at night, and my lawyer told me that the audio proof and the security cameras would be enough, so I didn't need the extra trouble of reporting them too. He'd also threatened to make sure I pay for what I was doing to him right before he left, and I had that on record too. So, I guess I shouldn't be too worried about what's going to happen even if we do end up going to court. All I want is my money back and hopefully a restraining order against these psychotic monsters with no regard for anyone else except their own selves. And I totally forgot to share what happened here. Once I whipped out the evidence of them trying to threaten me and intimidate me at my house to settle for $5,000 at the next mediation session and told them that I wanted to take this to trial and have my brother sent to prison, my family realized I wasn't actually bluffing and I was very much capable of doing that. That was finally what forced them to agree to give me my money back and also pay for my door to be replaced, just because I'm petty like that. I also managed to get a restraining order against them because what my brother had said about making me pay was concerning given his history of lying, scheming, and tantrum throwing. Now, instead of sending money back to my mom so she can repay my uncle, I'm doing it directly because I'm not in touch with her anymore. It's been a really busy time for me lately, but I'm doing well now since I don't have to carry the burden of my crap family anymore. I've heard that they're saying all sorts of things about my fallout with them to the rest of the family just to get me ostracized, but so far it's not working because people don't believe them since they've always been self-victimizing narcissistic people, and I finally called them out on their bullshit, and I'd gladly do it again.